Sacred 3 is the third major installment in the series and the first entry by developer Keen Games. Carrying the banner onwards from Ascalon, the developers of the previous games in the franchise, Keen take a real stab, sometimes all too literally, at the heart of the genre that I've always held fondly, bringing a slew of changes that aren't going to be seen as welcome to some fans of a very classic game model.
Sorry about that. That was supposed to kill you.
The plot focuses on the heart of Ankaria, a powerful artifact that is linked to the land and draws its power from it. In the opening scene, it is stolen by the main villain, a sinister, malevolent entity of particular nastiness that goes by the name of Zane. It's revealed pretty quickly that it's just the beginning. If he can disrupt the forces of the land enough, he can bend the artifact to his will and become unstoppable. This is where the four heroes of the story, cliched defenders of justice from the four corners of the world, come in. It's an old story given very little in the way of a new twist.
Heroes defeated the Dark Elf Matriarch.
The narrative is what is supposed to give the game a little uplift, but really, this is where it all started to come apart for me. It's laboured humour that tries far too hard to poke fun at itself. This has been done in the past to great success, but not this time, I'm afraid. When every single line of dialogue either sounds deliberately bored with its own cliches, pokes fun at the genre with almost fourth wall breaking cringiness, or at its worst, shoehorns terrible pop culture references in, it's not a pleasurable experience.
All you're doing is making him angry. And you wouldn't like him when he's angry.
My personal bugbear was the first weapon spirit you get at the end of the first mission, a great little add-on that changes how you fight, a wonderful little addition to the game, but it also gives you a little pop-up voiceover depending on what you're doing.
Know anyone interested?
Unfortunately, the first one you get is the spirit of an unsuccessful ladies' man, which means you spend the next 5 missions being bombarded with blatantly, uncomfortably sexist remarks. It may just be me, but getting into a grapple with an ogre and having the voiceover say things like, "I'll still respect you in the morning," and "threesome," just make me cringe. Who thought that was alright?
They stole our heart? They didn't even buy us dinner first.
Moving on, the audio of the game is always something I'm keen to talk about. It's always an important part of the experience for me, and Sacred 3 rarely fails to deliver on quality. The sounds rarely feel repetitive, and the general quality of the recording is very high. The voiceovers are clear and crisp, the voice actors are varied, and the environmental effects are each very unique and recognisable. Which is a huge shame when the actual scripting of the voice acting is so terrible. As I mentioned before, every single line feels like a joke at its own expense, or a shoehorned reference. It's almost upsetting how often I sat and rolled my eyes at the dialogue, despite enjoying the game itself. The clips are recycled often, and the little quips at the end of every kill multiplier fail to give the game the arcade style that it feels they were aiming for.
Help, man.
If I could turn the dialogue off, I probably would. It's that poor. The game itself ran beautifully on my computer, capturing footage at a solid 80 plus frames per second, even in the midst of masses of combat. The engine handles the whole thing smoothly, and the style of the artwork is just fantastic. Seriously, this game looks gorgeous. But the end of level screen. I would have thought that they could have hired the artist, who's done such great work through the rest of the game, to maybe redo that one obvious placeholder image. No? Oh well. The cutscenes are stylized, even if the voiceovers are a bit lacking, and look great in their own minimalist way, and the whole package is very well polished. Although this is what we expect from a modern release, it's still nice to see things so well finished.
The fate of Ankaria appears to rest in Zane's hands.
The gameplay is a beast of two halves. It makes some really great leaps in some areas, and in others it just seems to step backwards. Let's start on a high. Scratch that. Let's start on a disclaimer, and then a high. This game is terrible on a keyboard. It's nice to play on a gamepad though, so use one of those if you plan to. But the good points, the combat, being the majority of the game, is fluid and intuitive. The special abilities, of which you get to choose 2 per level, are varied and useful, charge through normal attacks quickly, and the upgrades you eventually buy for them feel like a real boost. The monsters are varied, the tactics you need to employ are easy to pick up and difficult to stay on top of. All in all, it's a strangely satisfying experience for what is essentially tap A until something dies. The weapon spirits you collect add real boosts to the combat and are really varied, which is a shame when it felt like I was choosing them based on the least annoying voiceover they supplied by the end. The bad points. The special abilities feel like the only way to win by about mission 5 and onwards. The basic attacks at this point are just ways of charging them, and against any more than a single moderately tough enemy, you'll feel like you're bashing against a wall. You need to spam your skills to take on anything more than, say, 6 or so enemies, and taking a ton of damage is almost unavoidable. There is a complete lack of loot in the game as well. Seriously, who doesn't put loot in a hack and slash? The gold that nearly every enemy drops is used to boost the stats and unlock a single track of abilities on your armor, which is non-changeable, or weapons, which are given to you at set points in the game, and you very rarely don't have enough to simply boost everything to maximum. It's an arbitrary system that could have been significantly improved with a little variety, but comes across feeling very dumbed down and simplified.
Better you get it than the Empire.
In conclusion, Sacred 3 is a fun game, but it really brings nothing new to the genre and misses several things out that I guess we would consider standard to games of its type. It feels cut down and oversimplified, but that gives it a peculiar appeal to short bursts of gaming. The combat is satisfying, even if the dialogue makes me want to gouge out my own ears with a spoon. The whole thing is just a mixed bag. There are great points, and there are really poor ones. This is going to appeal to a lot of casual players, but I think anyone wanting a more in-depth experience for their cash, like me, is going to be left feeling disappointed. If you're a fan of the genre and fancy something a little less serious, a little more arcadey, then this is going to be right up your street, but I don't think it'll appeal to everyone. In my opinion, this game sits firmly in the middle of the road on almost every point. Its plus points are almost equally balanced by what it lacks, and as such, the game sits firmly at 4 out of 8 for me.